Welcome. We're so excited to have you here today. We're going to be talking about Customer Zero, how Sentinel-1 revolutionized our SOC. Now, before we get going, I'd just like to say, if you have any Q&A, any questions that you would like us to answer, use the Q&A box. We will try and get back to you as soon as we can. Now, before we dive in today, I want to introduce our speakers. My name is Anthony Lascala. I am Sentinel-1's technical evangelist, formerly a director of cyber vCISO, as well as a SOC manager. And I'm joined today by Carter Church, Sentinel-1's security hyperautomation manager. Hey, Carter, great to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Super excited to get into this conversation.
Oh, yeah. Before we dive in, though, I want to set the stage. In today's security landscape, cybercrime is expected to cost businesses over $10 trillion this year alone. I want to reiterate that because I did a double take when I first saw this as well. $10 trillion. We are long past effective cybersecurity being a business imperative. It is a requirement for survival now. Customers, analysts, and even our own SOC team have talked to us about their everyday challenges in security. And here's what we're hearing. Number one, orchestrating in the SOC is difficult with many different tools and processes in place. Multiple vendors and legacy tools exacerbate this issue by being complex to manage and not well integrated with other solutions. Limiting security teams on what they can automate in their environment. I personally spent hours on integrations when leading my SOC. Just getting the legacy tool sets to properly funnel logs to our centralized SIEM was a massive administrative burden on top of the automation limitations of a syslog-based event source. Number two, this results in a challenge finding skilled resources to expertly manage these tools, yet alone to have enough skilled resources to provide 24/7 coverage, all while they're needing to do more with less. Did someone say burnout? And number three, both fragmented security and resource constraints compound the already present challenge of manual processes, adding additional administrative load to analysts that are already struggling to stay afloat in a sea of alerts that they may or may not be able to get to. On that same point, we have data to back this up as well. Validated by 451 Research, in a typical SOC, nearly 50% of all security alerts are never investigated. Think about that. It's a 50-50 coin flip on whether you see the breach at all because teams are overloaded, understaffed, and drowning in low fidelity alerts from siloed tools. But what if this is a process problem, not a people problem? We were so fascinated by this question that we commissioned the 451 Vanguard research report from S&P Global to capture analyst Mark Ayer's take on the future of security operations. When analysts are armed with improved data, analytics, and the benefits of combining ML and advanced AI into their security platform, total strain on the analyst is reduced, as well as dwell time. This is what enables those analysts to actually hit and triage 100% of their alerts. Now, Mark Ayer's key finding really hit home for us. The goal isn't to replace analysts, it's to autonomously handle the vast majority of L1 and L2 analysis so that analysts can focus on high-risk threats and the other facets of their job that often are backlogged. Now, Mark put it best. This is about enabling analysts to get home for dinner. Now, I know that might be a tall order. I remember when I was back at the SOC, getting home for dinner was a rarity, if ever. But hopefully, this will also reduce the overall level of paranoia we also feel. But I know that that's a tall order. Now, we have seen these same challenges. You know, Sentinel-1 operates its own SOC and operates and is not immune to these challenges that a lot of the standard traditional SOCs are facing today. Now, we were able to overcome this through the implementation of hyperautomation across our stack. Now, Carter, that's why I have you here today. Tell us, what is going on in Sentinel-1 stack and what is some of the cool stuff that we've been able to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So super excited just to dig into all of this, right? I mean, for our own security team, we sit at kind of a really awesome intersection. On one end, we work for Sentinel-1, which means we get to leverage all of the cool products that are available to our customers and that we produce. But also, at the end of the day, we're just a SOC. We're just a security team. So again, we're kind of strategically positioned to see both of these things at the same time. And again, what I want to talk about today is how we actually use our products, how we drink our own champagne right here at SentinelOne, and what we've done on our journey to build an autonomous defense and how we've overcome all these problems that you're talking about here. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in.
Yeah, for sure. So again, when I talk about like we've used our own products, what does that really mean? Well, there's kind of three that I want to highlight that I think really assist us in the SOC that really pertain to all of these topics, that we're talking about when we talk about autonomizing. So one is AI SIEM. Now, AI SIEM is our platform, that sits on top of our data lake, where if you think of this process of we have all this data, we need to aggregate this into one kind of single unified place, and then give analysts the ability to kind of easily query across this. But we also have things on the other end of that. So once we've collected that data and we've ensured that it's in the right format, how are we actually actioning that or operationalizing that? And so two of the major kind of key contributors there for us are Purple AI and Singularity Hyperautomation. Now in Purple AI, we're talking about the ability for an analyst to ask a natural language question the same way they would to another teammate. And say, hey, I'm curious, have you seen this indicator? Can you help me craft this query? Can you help me understand this complex cybersecurity topic, right? So all that's super beneficial for an analyst to have, and something that we've seen, totally up level our ability to onboard new analysts and to also assist analysts that are kind of threat hunting and things like that. On the other end of that is Singularity Hyperautomation. And so with Singularity Hyperautomation, again, we're able to orchestrate our response to all of these things very autonomously. And so we'll today kind of talk about the intersection of really just all of those three things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and this all starts at a foundation layer of data.
Yeah.
And that is where we see this graphic, right?
Exactly, yeah. And when we talk about lots of data, I think we're a pretty good candidate to talk about that, right? I mean, we operate a pretty complex environment here. Again, we're a hybrid cloud infrastructure. We generate petabytes of telemetry. We ingest security signals from thousands of unique sources. I could go on and on and on. And so this problem just compounds for us, right? It's really critical that as we're talking about building these higher order solutions that are operating over data, that foundational data layer is actually capable of, hosting that data in the right format and also being scalable and easily queryable. And so all these things are important. On that last kind of slide, if we look generally at these are a couple things, this slide is more architectural. So on the very bottom here, you have kind of all of your data that's actually coming in. On our next slide here, you have all kind of that data as it's actually coming in. So this is everything that we collect, right? Whether it's data that you're bringing from partners, whether it's from our agent, whether it's from any number of places you're bringing in. What's critical for us is we're able to support all of that. We're able to ingest that and again, unify it into kind of one layer. And that makes that response on top of that super easy to orchestrate. Because now once all that data is there, we can start taking some pretty cool action on it. And again, don't want to spoil too much too early, but I'm excited to show when we combine these things, what conclusions we can kind of come to for an average security alert.
Yep, absolutely. And really the base layer there is you have to have the good data to then layer the automations on top of garbage in, garbage out, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not just the good data, but also that foundation that can actually support it, right? I mean, yep. I've been in other SOCs that were not SentinelOne, and when using other kind of legacy tools, you end up, maybe the data is all there for you to actually do what you need to do. But if I'm waiting hours for a query to return, now I want to try to deploy some solution on top of that's running a bunch of simultaneous queries. It's just never going to scale. And so it's just really critical that we have the right data, but also the right platform to actually be able to operationalize it.
Yeah, we have to be able to handle that level of data.
Exactly. Yeah. And so kind of to that point, right, before we could even really think about automation or any of these other things that, I'm so passionate about and want to talk about, we had to solve that data problem first. Again, that's not just some nice to have. It's actually the only way that we can hunt at the speed and the scale that our adversaries operate. Of course, again, the challenge that I think is facing probably every SOC, everyone on this call can probably resonate with this, is you want to ingest all the things. You want to have visibility into everything across the organization. But again, that's just it's such a difficult problem. And so I think, what we're doing with AI SIEM is the reason why it is the cornerstone of our operations. It means that our analysts can run these massive complex queries across petabytes of high cardinality data and get answers in seconds, not hours.
Well, and having this level of data is great. but we're not quite there where we're stopping the attack yet. So what's the next step that we need to take?
Yeah, of course. So when we actually kind of think about automation solutions traditionally, if we assume we're using AI SIM and we kind of have all this data collected for us, that's kind of where hyperautomation comes into the picture for us. And so I think on our next slide, yeah, we have like, just generally, this is how I've seen, most of the automation lifecycle work throughout my career. And again, I think a lot of folks will resonate here with SOAR in some way, shape, or form. But what we really do in a SOC is we, make this conscious decision one day to say, hey, let's start automating, let's be more serious about this, is we're probably coming into an environment where we already have alerts that are onboarded. We probably already have, some semblance of playbooks of how I expect analysts to work those. And that's a pretty good place to start, right? We can look at all of our alerts. We can look at our playbooks and just collect some metrics to understand, okay, what are the alerts that are taxing my SOC? Where can I go help? Where should I put my resources first, right? We can prioritize those by what's the easiest solution that I can build that's easy to maintain, but also drives the greatest change across my organization. And we rinse and repeat that across our entire catalog of alerts. And as much as I want to dunk on this, I think that it actually is a pretty good first start, right? Like there's a reason that SOAR worked initially and why it was around for so long. This genuinely is a good way to go from 0 to 1, but it doesn't scale. As you're trying to deploy this across the whole process, now you're signing yourself up for every new alert that we onboard. Let's go ahead and make sure there's an up-to-date playbook that's always ready for that. And now there's an up-to-date automation that's taking the actions that I expect in that playbook, and my analysts understand and they can audit what's happening there. And it's just kind of a nightmare.
Big surprise, the hyperautomation manager has a fond view of SOAR. I can tell you as a SOC manager, I do not. I spent hours building out rules and then more hours needing to be rededicated to them once they all broke. And so having something like hyperautomation, which we're going to be diving into in much more detail here in just a second, is really that next iteration of SOAR that is going to unlock the SOC's capability to scale.
Right, exactly. So again, kind of to your point there on traditional SOAR, we saw all these problems at SentinelOne, right? And it's the reason why we wanted to try to develop something in the next iteration, why we wanted to build a tool that could actually be used and it would cover all of these other, kind of bases that we talk about here. And so again, when we talk about, building something like this, it's really the idea of what if we democratize automation from having to exist as part of only and strictly case management? What if we gave you the ability to leverage something that's a no-code platform, but your trigger for when that thing is called can be legitimately anything. Maybe it's a webhook or a schedule or an email coming in or whatever you want, right? So that was kind of big step one. And also, what if the platform was built in such a way where it encouraged modularity, where it wasn't you build one giant workflow for every single alert that comes in, but you can actually kind of define these broad and reusable functions. So now every time I want to do something like search for a user's historical IP, I'm not reinventing the wheel and building that into all of my new workflows. I build a function the same way I would if I was writing code. And I can now drag that function in and leverage that across all my workflows. And so you can already see, like logically, we're kind of stepping towards, fixing all the problems that we talk about with SOAR.
Yeah, sounds like a SOAR that doesn't require a master's to build. Right.
And doesn't require the job rec of software developer to add to your list of already 100 things that you want a SOC analyst to be able to do, right?
Yep, exactly. Let's not make the hiring challenge any more challenging. Now, before we take a look at what your team built, I heard you recently also brought in Purple AI through our MCP server. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is like our third tenant here that I'm really kind of excited about. If we had AI SIM of getting the data and hyperautomation was kind of that, deterministic fashion of how do we go execute some steps that I know when I want something to happen, then Purple AI brings in that ability to kind of, reason and assist in the way that we've talked about before. So one element of that, outside of MCP is just the ability for analysts to chat with Purple. And I think, for those on the call who have had the ability to do that, it can be really awesome. And it actually helps our analysts so much in an investigation. It's like having a teammate 24/7, 365 to be able to kind of engage with and assist you, which is, again, already huge. But, at our last OneCon, we released Purple AI's new MCP. And so with Purple AI's new MCP, that means that we can leverage all of the intelligence of Purple, but in our own totally customizable and automated response. So we can just do tons of things for the analyst, almost akin to them having to kind of sit down and even ask those questions. We can almost kind of do that for them and have some summaries and things that are generated for that user before they're even kind of coming on to an alert.
Yeah, so we're really starting to kind of see that migration of help me do my work to do my work for me with my oversight.
Exactly.
Awesome. That sounds great.
Yeah, and I think a cool example that I like with this, just to show like what could be possible. Like I think a lot of people, it's one of those problems of having the blank canvas, right? You have this super powerful tool, but it can almost be hard to conceptualize. This thing is so powerful, but how do I actually apply this? Where would it fit in my organization? And so one of the examples that's on screen now that I like to talk to or to show is this idea of managing GitHub in kind of a very CI/CD centric environment. And so imagine you have Alex, let's say a developer on the left there, who wants to submit a merge request to some repository that exists in his organization that's obviously somewhat critical. However, instead of this being a process of just have an approver over here and kind of being fully reliant on that, we can start to integrate things like Purple into really any element that we'd like. And so again, in this case, we could say, well, what if that actually isn't Alex? What if his endpoint's compromised? What if that's actually an actor who, again, wants to leverage the fact that this CI/CD pipeline exists and submit some kind of bad code to this repository? Well, we could automatically orchestrate questions to Purple, which has full visibility into the endpoint and all the logs that we've talked about, to say, what endpoint does Alex normally work from? Does that endpoint have an active infection? And are there any critical vulnerabilities that are open? And so you can already kind of see this process where we maybe wouldn't have had insight to any of this in the first place, and we're totally reliant. We can start to bring the intelligence of Purple and all that data that we have kind of collected as SentinelOne, into your own orchestrated and automated response.
Yeah, and that's incredibly important, especially as we've seen more and more attacks and attack vectors coming through things like GitHub commits and more supply chain focused attacks.
Yep.
Now, this is just one example, though. You can expand this across essentially your entire stack, which you've done here at SentinelOne for us, essentially. And we're going to dive into that, right?
Yeah, we will. So I have a quick example to talk through here that's basically just that. So we kind of talk about this idea of, we know what's hard with automation. We've kind of been alluding to this, right? There's all this data coming in that your analysts are having to sort through. There's an alert that they're actually looking at, and they really need to marry up that data between what is concerning in that alert and where does that data live and how can I draw some conclusions from what this is actually meaning. So the example that I have to show today, I think maybe next slide there. Sorry. If you want to step back one, my bad. So basically what we're kind of saying here generally is, we have an analyst who's going to kind of come in here and look at this Okta alert that we'll show on the next page. So this is kind of a wrap of the whole thing, but I'd rather just kind of talk to you guys, about it kind of step by step. So one of the first things that we'll show here is just the actual alert itself. And so again, I'm just going to show you kind of the raw JSON that might reflect an actual alert coming from Okta here. So we're going to kind of get a little nitty gritty there, but I promise we'll keep it engaging and high level. I won't show you too much JSON. But the idea here is, we have an alert coming in that probably looks pretty similar to what most of you are looking at in your own SOC. In this case, this is an Okta self-service password reset for a user, me, occurring in Prague from a Windows 11 device, and we have an IP address there that is associated. Now, what we'll look at over the next couple slides is really what does an investigation for this look like? Now, all these arrows that I have pointing are things that we would probably want to investigate in the SOC. A couple questions that I might want to draw on early is, is Carter expected to be in Prague? Have we seen this IP historically for Carter? Does Carter even have a Windows 11 device assigned to him? These are all questions that we can start to ask, and we know that we have the data for. We really just need to kind of instrument that and have this happen autonomously over any type of alert that comes in. So setting the stage there, let's walk through. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Anthony. Sorry.
I think Carter's just trying to hide his secret vacation to Prague. Well, we'll step through this. We'll see.
That's exactly what it is. This is all a convoluted scheme. So one of the first things that we might want to do here is go grab the playbooks that are actually relevant to this. And this is kind of a twofold approach. Number one, it's just really important for us to actually surface the playbooks to the analyst that might tell them how to work this alert or what to expect, right? The kind of governance and guidance on what they should be doing here. But also, the solution that we're going to show is kind of how we would work through top to bottom, orchestrating our response autonomously. And so it's also very important that if we're going to build an autonomous solution, that solution understands what are the guardrails and expectations for our environment. And so one of the first things that we'll do is go grab all this and we'll surface that. So now we're kind of coming into an alert, and we know the guardrails. We know generally how our organization wants to work this alert.
So this is like actually the agent enriching itself with the guidelines for operating within the organization, within the environment, specifically tailored to this particular alert as well.
Exactly.
Oh, fantastic.
So after we do that, we already kind of highlighted some key, potential irregularities. So the agent kind of just wants to understand more about who is Carter, right? To start answering these questions. And so it'll get some information about me, right? It understands, my email, how that maps to my name, how it maps to my title, what my time zone is, what my Slack status is, right? This is a fun one because a lot of people will put out of office or the airplane emoji or something like that. So you can honestly glean a lot of really cool information from these sources that you kind of may have never even considered as part of your response. Cost center, who their manager is in cases where we may not want to reach out to that user individually, when they were hired in the organization, and also just where their location is. And so for us, one of the most important things here is we've now auto-identified the place that I'm expected to be working, which again is going to be a discrepancy from what we saw in our original alert.
Exactly. And this is the type of information that you would, in a traditional SOC, need to actually go to. This might actually be within the HR application itself. So you actually either need to go into that application to pull that information, or you need to go to HR, and then you're relying on them getting you that information so that you can continue your incident response.
Exactly.
So what else are we pulling out from the other data sources?
Yeah, exactly. So you'll see a common trend here kind of with what you just said there of we had this process where you can almost see kind of how the gears turn for us. We had this process where it did involve something that was a little bit more manual. And so we said, well, we know we do this often across a lot of alerts. So why don't we just orchestrate that and provide that as a tool? And so we did the same thing here, right? We may also want to grab other tickets that are kind of related to this individual and also all the assets that we've assigned to them. We said that this happened from a Windows 11 device. Well, what if we ask the question, has IT even provided Carter a Windows 11 device? So we can do that. We can go dump asset inventory. Of course, again, there's so much information you'll see in that top screenshot of things that we could grab from our console, right? Is it showing infected? Is it in protect mode? Is it connected to the network? All this data that we can kind of correlate that will hopefully help us answer this question. Now on the bottom, you'll see something similar, but here we're actually grabbing relevant tickets that are associated. So in this case, we'll look for, we're not processing any individual alert in isolation. We understand this could be a potential identity compromise. This might be at the start of the boundary. So why don't we look, before and after to understand, were there any other cases where something could have happened here? If this is a self-service password reset, that does require MFA to undertake. So did we see a rogue or anomalous MFA added before this or something along those lines? And so we're able to come here and correlate all that data together. And again, understand this alert, not just in the context of what happened here, but in the context of the entire organization and the timeline for all of our security alerts.
Building like this entire persona packet almost of what that identity has done in previously and any related data around it.
Exactly.
Providing as much context as you can, not just to the model, but then also to the analysts that'll end up catching this alert so that they have all of the information to make the best choice in the moment.
Exactly. And we'll continue here, right? We know that there was a concern about location. So we now know that there was a concern about location. We've collected the location Carter's expected in. So now we're going, okay, well, he doesn't work out of that area. Could he have potentially traveled there? And so we can do this too. We can go query travel logs and say, do we have any pre-approved work travel by that manager to visit this individual place that's in question? And so what you'll see here is some results actually did get returned. But if you actually read kind of the area that this was, pertaining to in the vendor and description there, this is obviously not to Prague. This is not to the area that we are, considering. And so we're, again, aggregating data, better understanding the full picture here, and trying to just form this full end-to-end timeline of what's going on. But you can imagine if this was legitimate pre-approved work travel, you would have seen here that, that person is registered to go to that area, and that would give the analyst more information to understand why this could be happening and why it might be benign.
Again, just chopping down total time to respond because you have the information at your fingertips.
Yeah. And on that, right, if you were to look, everything that's happened so far has happened in the span of a minute, right? Like, so everything here, like it's taking us more time to even explain why this is helpful than it is to surface that data actually in the context of a response. That's the most powerful thing about this.
We're also learning how good you are at hiding your secret vacations as well.
So,
All right. Well, we have more integrations to talk about as well that help with overall incident response. Let's dive into some of those.
yeah. So, at this point, we've kind of hit the high points of some of the data we might have actually gathered to help us make this decision. But also, we can start to, kind of be a little bit more overt in how we're querying or start to take a little bit of action here, too. And so one of the things that we can do is reach out to the user on Slack and formulate a message and get an answer, right? So we'll reach out with an interactive Slack message and say, hey, we saw a self-service password reset for your account, from this IP in Prague on a Windows 11 device. We haven't seen this IP for you historically. Can you confirm, did you do this? Are you using some sort of VPN or a proxy that might explain this activity? Blah, blah, blah. And so we can kind of service a message to the employee, to the end user that is asking about this. Now you'll see at the bottom, they can provide some additional context. They can also acknowledge or deny this case. But so again, we're still in that kind of data collection mode of just aggregating more information. So when the analyst gets on the alert, they have a full picture and can make a determination.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and if they hit acknowledge here that it was them, we might have a concern here because this is we are sending a message to the identity that there's a concern over. But we've thought of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So in this particular case, we know that this might be an identity compromise. And so again, our solution is smart enough to understand I am messaging a person who maybe it's a coin flip as to who I'm getting a response from. And so what that means is, again, let's consider that coin flip. If I'm on the end and I'm the attacker, well, maybe I hit that acknowledge button. We're not really biasing too much in the acknowledgement direction. It's nice to know. We'll surface that to an analyst, but just because one person hits one acknowledge button doesn't mean the alert is just magically solved. It's all information. It's all gathering that right data. But you can imagine to the other end, if either of those people denies, that's a huge bias in the negative direction, right? So the scale here is kind of not, exactly linear, positive, negative. If any one of those people hits deny, we're assuming the employee, our message made it through. They can deny. We're immediately kind of escalating that for a number of reasons. But the acknowledgement is just kind of more generally about, a little bit of that positive direction.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have that interactivity that loops back into the ticket as well, right?
Exactly. So what you saw before is what an end user might see. What you're seeing on this end is actually what is being surfaced to the analyst that's working this alert. And so on the left, you'll see that matches the question that we just asked them. But in the middle column there, you can see that this end user denied that. And they also said, they provided some context on the right. They said, I did travel to New Orleans, but not Prague. I have no idea what this is about. Can you please advise me on next steps? And so you kind of just saw the form of how an end user might fill that out. Now you're seeing what would an analyst actually see. And then, you can obviously see, again, collecting more data for the analyst to make that determination.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads us to reprioritization based on that response.
Exactly. So the second that comes through, we've already been kind of like, this is a little bit weird. We should probably keep an eye on this. We've probably already even elevated that to like a medium priority. But we've now said, okay, this is extremely concerning. Let's elevate that to the highest priority that we have available. And for us as a SOC, this means that someone's phone is being automatically called right now for this alert and basically saying someone needs to look at this ASAP. The justifications provided, right? Why are we doing this? Well, we're elevating the priority given a concerning lack of consistency among the enrichments. And also we have explicit denial by the employee. So again, a person has not touched this ticket so far, but there's now a path to go from an alert that many SOCs may not even be able to look at because of scale. There's now a auto investigation to look at that thing. And then also a path where that alert can become a highest priority alert in your organization. And that dynamic range is really hard to achieve in a SOC.
Oh yeah, it's incredibly challenging to get to that position where you can respond at that kind of speed. And really what this is reducing dwell time, because dwell time directly correlates with higher breach costs, higher regulatory fines. So we're really talking about speed as well as reducing overall load on the analyst so that they can then multiply that across all of their alerts.
Exactly.
We also build out an executive summary here.
Yeah, and so where I want to kind of come in here is almost like wipe the slate clean a little bit from the slides that you just saw. Because as an analyst, you're not coming in and probably looking at the playbook's comment first and sorting through every single enrichment that's returned. You're probably trying to come in and get an understanding. We gave the example of now your phone's getting called that says, hey, someone needs to look at this alert right now. You need to look at this alert right now. So the last thing I want is to surface all this data, but then have you have to comb and sort through each individual enrichment return as you're kind of already giving a prioritized response to that thing. So what we'll do is when we're kind of to a stage where we're ready to kind of like complete that phase of the investigation, we'll generate this executive summary. And so again, what I want to do is wipe the slate clean from what you've kind of seen. I want to read through just a couple, snippets from here and just show you how much power is here from an analyst coming onto an alert, seeing that alert body, and then immediately getting a summary that is this enriched. So in that alert overview, we say, Okta self-service password reset for Carter. I know it's a Windows 11 device. I know that it's this IP. It's geolocated to Prague. Again, the actor and the target are Carter. I know that he's a security hyperautomation manager in America, Chicago, expected location in Alabama. I know that he has these 2 devices that are assigned out to him. And I know he has common IPs of X and Y, which is not the one that we're seeing this activity take place from. I know that he had travel to New Orleans that obviously would have coincided with this other activity that we're seeing, and means that being in Prague is probably not possible right now. So there's a lot of things that are concerning. Here it all is in one kind of paragraph form for you as an analyst to actually come in and understand what's in scope. And then what we'll end off with is a final recommendation. So this is, again, based on our playbooks and the way that we want to handle alerts, we can recommend what should the analyst do next. So we say, nothing here should surprise you. Let's immediately escalate this to an incident. Let's immediately execute all of these kind of break glass workflows that we have to invalidate accounts. Let's do any kind of manual session revocations that are necessary. Let's, after containment, make sure that password's reset and their authenticator is reset with IT and all of these things. And we end with that statement of a user denial plus an anomalous foreign IP and geolocation meet the compromise criteria. So again, you're coming into 2 paragraphs that accurately, distill everything that we just talked about into an alert into literally just this.
And this goes a long way in terms of democratizing the responsibilities as well, because you're now L1, L2 analysts. This is something an L1, L2 analyst can handle without issue. It's with that assistance from the AI assistant. Now, we've kind of walked through this entire workflow and how everything operates together. Let's put this into just like one concise visual so that everyone kind of sees kind of what this workflow looks like. Take us through this.
Yeah, I know. Everybody's going to freak out because we have a big diagram. And I feel that. But I won't go too deep here. Basically, you can imagine this cycle of new alert comes in. So let's do a couple things, right? We all talked about these. Let's get those playbooks. Let's get the workflows of actions we could take. Let's understand the alert. And let's also get some data about human in the loop. We can then ask the question of, hey, what enrichment should we be running here? Which of these actions or hyperautomation workflows would actually help the analyst to run? And all the things that you saw as comments are just hyperautomation workflows. It's the coolest thing about this. It's an orchestrator of hyperautomation calling other sub workflows that kind of accomplish these tasks. When these things come back, we can parse those enrichments. We can perform whatever actions those things are and return that data. And so you can imagine this loop that continues until kind of this agent believes that it has taken all of the action possible that would actually help the analyst and surfaced all the relevant details.
That's awesome. This should just give you a visual of that same workflow that we just walked through and collecting that info and then funneling it right back up to the analyst for their determination.
Exactly.
Now, I know that our audience is going to be really interested to hear what was the actual result. How did we benefit from implementing all of these automations and the hyperautomation over our entire stack?
Yeah, again, a great question. I think that, there are some metrics that we can obviously show that are very overt here. And there's some other things that I will talk about that are just general benefits. But number one, we kind of just did an initial measurement to just say how much time are we reclaiming as a SOC, based on this. And we're definitely seeing, over 100 hours, well over 100 hours kind of a week reclaimed from manual investigation, right? These are all steps that we just showed in that example of what an analyst would have otherwise been doing themselves is now kind of done for you in a lot of cases. When we measure what an average alert looks like, about 75% of all of these steps that we would expect to be taken for us in that approach that you just saw are already there. So most of the data is already surfaced and ready for them to just make a final determination. But I think most importantly in all of this, which is the one that's a little bit harder to measure, is you now have a second set of eyes on every single alert that comes across your queue. And so that means that for every analyst, they have a co-pilot that's there with them for every single alert that's gathering all of this data. And for, the analyst who's having to wake up at 2 a.m. or something, who's never seen an alert before, it's not just I'm alone on an island. It's, hey, here's an alert, here's all the things I saw, and here's all the reasons that I decided that it was pertinent to wake you up. Can you help me solve this thing? And so, yeah, I think that's one that's a little bit harder to judge by a metric, but it's just so important for security teams.
No, it really is just having that second set of eyes. You said it best. Having another resource available that is going to help you tackle these alerts. And I wanted to also double click on the 100 hours per week, because that's more than an FTE's worth on a weekly basis. That's more than 2 FTE's worth.
Yeah.
But the critical piece here is this is freeing up from that manual investigation time. It is relieving from that monotonous and really grinding triage work where you might be going through thousands of different alerts trying to triage them. That is what's taking up the time. And with this savings, analysts get to do actually the other aspects of their job that have been kind of whittled away as we've gone through this data explosion of like EDR and telemetry. So what we're doing is actually bringing the SOC analysts back to their true form, where they're able to do triage, incident response, threat modeling, actual analysis and auditing of the environment, maintenance, exposure and vulnerability management. So it's enabling the SOC analysts to do more.
Exactly. As a SOC team, the more time I can take out of that bucket from reactive into proactive, the better that I can be in helping to prevent things going forward.
What's proactive?
Well, I think this is what I'm really excited about. So, Anthony, I'll let you introduce it, but I'll talk to this in a second.
No, you know what? I don't think that there is anyone better qualified to introduce this than you are, Carter. Take it away.
Fair enough. Well, we already talked about, Purple MCP kind of being available on the right there. And so this is something you can access. We've got the link here. It's fantastic. And I would encourage everyone to play around with this. I think that it's so cool and there's so many use cases and it's just so well built by that team. So big kudos there. But on the left is something, kind of on the back end of this kind of webinar that we're doing, I wanted to share out. And so if we saw kind of that larger scale orchestration diagram of how might you implement something like this, of course, you can imagine that is kind of it's organization specific. There's a lot of kind of fine tuning that went into building that. But we wanted to kind of refine out the core disciplines of how something like that works and just make it available for folks to just better understand how are these technologies going to be leveraged going forward to actually up-level teams. And so what we have is kind of a very bare bones example of, what we would call an agentic orchestrator, of getting playbooks and getting actions that you can take and all of these things. And then it gives you the ability to feed in a security event of, a fake security event of whatever that might be and just kind of see how a model would respond. So it's all very theoretical, but it's a cool end-to-end approach where go grab, ask a model to generate you a fake alert for something, paste that in, make it look maybe a little anomalous if you want to, and just see how would a model actually react to this. And so these things are just kind of the core foundations for, how an orchestrator like this would work.
Oh, that's awesome. And so just to clarify, the orchestrator, we're putting that out as an example to the community essentially, so that everyone can get a sense of what some of these capabilities are, and then you can go and actually build out your own. Because while this may be theoretical, it's not theoretical within our own SOC. We have actually put this into production.
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. And if you guys want to hear more high-level examples of what is possible with hyperautomation, you can check out more use cases from the 451 report, ranging from incident response to exposure and vulnerability management. And you can find that on our website or through these QR codes here, the 451 Research Vanguard report, as well as the GitHub example agentic orchestrator. I'm going to leave these up for like a few more seconds. We should all be a little bit faster about pulling out our camera now. We should be used to it at this point. But I want to also say thank you, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate you being here today, listening to our spiel. And I hope that you guys all have a great rest of your day.